Hello, Empowered Woman. Welcome to this episode of the Empowered Woman podcast. Before I get to today's awesome guest, I wanted to ask you, is being a TEDx speaker on your bucket list? Well, my friend, after so many people asking me questions and for advice since I landed my TED Talk, I decided to host a workshop spilling all the details and steps that took me from sending in several applications and never hearing back to finally getting a yes. It's happening live Thursday, August 25th at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, but there will also be a lifetime replay if you can make it. It'll be a 90-minute masterclass plus a pop-up Facebook group for Q&A and all the things and connecting. The ticket is $55, and I have over 10 ladies in there already ready to rock and roll, so don't delay. Head to the link in my bio and save your seat. Now, about today's guest, I had the pleasure of talking to Marielle Melling, founder of Lovin Life with Littles. She helps parents gain clarity about what really matters and what our kids actually need. She shares time-saving systems and routines that help parents and children learn important lessons, find strength, and live in healthy ways. We talk about the importance of laughing more and living the simple side of parenting that leads to fulfillment and joy. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Empowered Woman podcast, the #1 show on personal growth, visibility, and profit for women entrepreneurs. If you're wanting to start believing in yourself, giving yourself permission to succeed, and let your voice be heard to make an impact in the world as an entrepreneur, this is the place for you. I am so glad that you're here. My name is Marta Spurk, and I'm your host, triplet mom, woman empowerment coach, and all things motivation extraordinaire. Welcome again, and let's dive into today's episode. Hi, Marielle. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, good to be here, Marta. Thanks.
Yay. So before we get started, I would love to remind our listeners to make sure and take notes because we're going to talk about some cool stuff here today, and also share with us on social media. So as you're listening to the episode and something hits, take a screenshot, tag me, tag Marielle as well. All the links, all the information on her is going to be on the show notes too. And let us know what resonated, because that's super helpful for us to know what's resonating and also to make sure our content is reflecting back on that as well. So without further ado, please tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Marielle, and I am the founder of Lovin Life with Littles and the author of Peace Amidst the Mayhem. And so my passion is really helping moms ditch the overwhelm and progress individually and as a family.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so important, especially for me with 3 little ones. And I love the name of your business too, because that's what we're looking for, right? Is having that harmony and making sure we're enjoying life with them because they do grow fast. What is that they say? The days are long, the years are short.
They're short, absolutely.
That couldn't be truer, right? Because some days are extremely long. And it's like, especially coming off of the holiday. Now, for me, I was telling my husband, like, some of these days seemed extra long. Like there had to have been some extra hours on those days. Yes. But we got to find ways to find gratitude and enjoy that journey. So I would love to know how you got into this, and then we'll get into more of the specifics of how tools and tips that you have for us parents out there.
For sure. So a while, years ago, I was in a time that was really, really crazy as far as like the responsibilities and what was going on in our lives. I was juggling 4 part-time jobs at the time. My husband was working insane hours away from home, really was never able to be home. And so the meals, the home, that was all on me. I was leading a volunteer organization. Most importantly, we had 5 little kids that we were raising. And I realized I somehow had an incredible amount of peace. And I was really content with my life. And I just felt like it was this gift that wasn't just for me. And so I started getting really intentional about what were the mindsets and the routines and what kinds of things were creating this peace in my life. And where did I see other people that were enjoying this, even though they had, not just busyness, but also big challenges going on in their lives. And so I started sharing those things. And that was the beginning of what Lovin Life with Littles is today. And then the deep dive into peace specifically became my book.
Oh, that's so powerful. And I love the beginnings of those stories.
That's one of the things that I always say. I think I repeat myself a lot on these episodes. It's fun to hear people's journeys on how things start. Because usually it's like, I never had a degree in any of this. And I'm an example of that as well. And then you start talking about it, or people will notice something about you that they say, you're really, really good at this. And you're like, oh, I haven't really given it much thought. And then you start working with that. And then for you, it wasn't really out of like a need. I really need to figure out how to balance all of this. Is you realized that you were really good at something, that something was working for you. And I'm assuming people may have noticed it as well. And you're like, well, it's time to share my tips and tricks.
Yeah.
How it happens. Or people giving you some feedback too?
It was both ways. Yeah. Because we also had a lot of other things going on in life beyond the busyness. And I just was able to be happy through that. And like I said, I just felt like it was a gift. And then I actually did this exercise and reached out to other people to help them share what they saw about me as far as like knowing myself. And anyway, and it did come up over and over, like, you have this peace and you're happy and you like all these different things. So I was like, oh yes, maybe this is where I need to go.
Oh, that is so wonderful. It's like the calling kind of found you. That's pretty awesome. So give us more specifics then, because you've uncovered some of these patterns, some of these hacks, if you will. Tell us more.
Yes. So when it comes down to peace specifically, like I said, I realized for myself that I had it in this time that was super crazy. And I looked around at other people who were enjoying it. And I saw one of my dear friends who had just lost her husband to cancer, left her with 3 young kids. I saw a mom whose husband left her with the kids, and a tornado came through and took out their home. And in these situations, people were still experiencing this peace. And it just became so clear to me that peace really has little to do with what's going on around us and everything to do with what's going on inside of us. So then as we dig in, where does that come from? And what I learned is that it comes from an alignment of what we want. That is huge, our desires. And then what we are doing, what we are saying, how we are living. And that the most powerful, the highest, is when we are centered on love. Right. And that's not brand new information. Like wisdom leaders or religious leaders have been teaching us this. Our experience teaches us this. When we look at the longest study about health and human happiness, what do we find? It's not job satisfaction. It's not our genes. It's not our socioeconomic status, but it is the state of our relationships that determines our health and happiness, the number one predictor. But then when you get down to it, like everybody says, oh yeah, it's great to love each other. It's great to have good relationships. But how do you actually do that in the day to day? So that's where a lot of my work has focused, is in the everyday living. How do we stay centered on this place of love? How do we learn to let go of all of the other things, the busyness, the need to control, the need for praise, comparison, all of those other things that pull at us? And then how do we shift our behavior so that we're able to live in that way?
And I do want us to talk more about the relationship, because obviously, like you're saying, that's like the core of everything. But something that you mentioned in the beginning that I think may take this conversation a little bit further to help people then find that peace with it. And in the relationships, you mentioned when you know what you want, when you honor those desires, and then your actions are in alignment with that, that's when you find that peace and that satisfaction. I was reading something not too long ago, because I've been getting a lot into human design since the last year. And then in learning that I'm a generator, I don't know if you're familiar with human design, but talking about following what lights you up, right? And I think in general terms, as a society, we've been kind of trained out of that. Don't follow your desires, right? Do what's right. Do what's expected of you. So we've kind of been out-trained from little kids, when little kids just follow what it is that they want to do. And then people tell them, no, you can't do this because this is not safe, or whatever it is. Then we kind of lose that spark, and we're just doing what we think we're supposed to be doing, or what people are telling us to do. And then come adulthood, what do you want? I don't know. I was told not to follow what I want to do. So tell us more about the desire piece. Is this like one of the main sources of the struggle then in finding that piece, is because we don't know what we want? Yeah. And how do we go about uncovering that?
Yeah, absolutely. I find that a lot with moms who have lost themselves in the shoulds of motherhood. And I think that as a society, we have really done ourselves a disservice in a lot of ways in what we expect motherhood to be and how we paint the picture of what it needs to look like. Yeah. And whether you are working inside the home or working outside the home and raising kids at the same time, there are a lot of expectations, and we shift our lives to try to meet those expectations. Mm-hmm. And so one thing that becomes really paramount is learning to be gut level honest with yourself, and to start looking at your shoulds, to start looking at your to-do list, to start looking at the way even you're running your business and you're running your home. And I like to say, we need to drop the shoulds and instead choose our want to and don't, will and won't. Right? Because if I look at a should, I should wash my sheets every week. I should, whatever. I should post every day to Instagram. I should, what are those shoulds that you're looking at? And then you say, is that really in alignment? Like looking at that, why do I really want to do that? And that's where the desire comes in. Why do I really want to do that? Do I really want to do that because I honestly think that is what's best for my family? Mm-hmm. Because I honestly feel that is what's best for me. That is what's going to allow me to serve my people, whether it's in business or at home. Yeah. Or is it because somebody told me I should, or because I saw that somebody else, or because if I don't, I might feel like a failure. A lot of times our shoulds are aligned with a place of fear. Yeah. And also going with the flow, right? Doing what's easy. As humans, we are wired to just continue doing what has worked for us in the past. Mm-hmm. So it takes a lot of bravery and it takes effort to do something different and to say, I'm not going to do this should. I'm going to take full responsibility and say, no, what I really want for my family is such and such. What I really want for my business is that, and then learning how to shift our behavior. Yeah.
Well, and this dumps us back into the relationship conversation, because if you have two people that are very clear on what it is that they want, and then they can communicate that to each other, beautiful, right? But like we were saying, that's usually not the case. Usually have two people that don't know what they want, that have these assumptions of what expectations are from them. They're not communicating or clearly stating what those expectations are. So we're constantly trying to predict what people are thinking, and we create stories in our heads that are usually not the truth. So tell us more about those dynamics, not only in terms of like spouses, right? Because then that obviously trickles down into the kids, but then in terms of the kids. And I do want to ask about personalities, because that's something I'm really big on. And I think that's usually what I bring to the conversation. If somebody was asking me this question, I would say, well, you need to understand yourself better, because then you can understand that person better. You know where they're coming from, and you can separate your identity from their identity and not take things personally. But I would love to hear your take on that.
Yeah. So one thing that I dig into a lot with when I'm talking about this is I go through like the ABCs of behavior change thing I've come up with. Okay. And the first is like this awareness that maybe there's something we want to shift, either in our relationship or in our behavior or what we care about or anything like that. And then where we often skip and where I think we need to put a lot more time is in what I say is B is the benefits. What benefit are you getting from that behavior, right? So often there is a need that is being met, whether it's a need for control, whether it's a need to be seen, whether it's a need for acceptance, which is a very human, real, we need connection. We are social beings, right? And so why have we continued to do this? So often we want to label behavior as like bad or negative, or we're frustrated that we keep doing that, instead of living in this place of gratitude of, hey, my incredible human brain has figured out a way to help me survive and adapt in this hard world. Mm-hmm. And that's where this has gotten me so far. And there are benefits to that. Right. And then we look at, okay, there are also consequences, and that's where C is. There are also consequences to what is going on. And are my eyes open to that, right? Is it worth it to me that it annoys my spouse every time I do this? Mm-hmm. Is it worth it to me that it's putting a wedge between the relationship between me and my kids, that I want to control this? And then we get to decide. As humans, we have so much choice over what we care about, over what goes on in the day-to-day. And it's easy to relinquish control. It's easy to say, I'm too busy. It's easy to fall back on what we've always done, on the habits that we've developed, the patterns in our relationships. But we do get to say, this is, I choose this or I don't. And then E is we embrace. We look at what do I really want in place of that, instead of trying to get rid of arguing or get rid of whatever it is within our home. We're saying, okay, what I want instead is this thing that is really centered on love, that is centered on my big picture and what I want in the big picture.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. So did you go from A, B, C, D, E?
Yeah.
What was D again?
Decide.
Okay. All right. Decide.
I do want to let go of this thing.
I love that. So is that something that you recommend, not only as like an introspective exercise, but having that conversation with your spouse and with the kids as well to uncover these things?
Yeah, this is especially for ourselves, because when it comes to parenting, especially, all we control is ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think as parents, often we are like, oh, wouldn't it be so easy if I could just control my kids? But the reality is that we don't.
Right.
The reality is that we don't. And so we always have to be looking at what is it that I can control in this scenario. And often with our kids, it is, we just do them a huge service when we start with ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's really helpful to look at kids and to start to understand their behavior, right? And uncover like, okay, when they're doing this thing, what are the needs they're trying to meet? That gives us a lot of compassion and helps them meet their needs in healthy ways that don't also drive the family insane. But this is particularly important as we're looking at our own parenting in our own lives.
100%. And it's as empowering as it is hard and challenging to realize that you have so much power in your hands. It's like, great, but it's a lot of responsibility. I think for me, a lot of this started, and I've shared this quite a few times here on the show, is when I decided to sleep train my kids when they were my babies, when they were 7 months old. And that was like the biggest lesson of, I am the leader. So I can't just let them decide, especially in the context of triplets. I have to decide what's going to be happening, right? And they're just going to follow suit. But then when it comes to behaviors, when they're more vocal and mobile, it gets a little bit trickier because there are more variables involved. And I'm assuming this is what you help moms with. What are some of the main challenges that moms come to you for help with?
Yeah. So I actually do a wide range. So I work from toddlers to teens.
Nice.
And we try to have a personal peace pyramid. So we do everything from looking at really it's getting clarity about what you want in your home. Right. And so a lot of that has to do with the 3 buckets that I talk about as home management. We have to get the nuts and bolts in place, right? And when you find systems and when you find routines that really make you productive in getting done the things that you need to do, not just so that you get more done, but so that you get done the things you need to do, simplify, get those things done. So we work on home management and systems, things like that. And then we work on family relationships. And a lot of that with younger kids, it is understanding behavior. It's really figuring out our own triggers so that we can respond in a way that is strengthening our relationship, right? Remember, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. Yeah. And if we build that relationship when they're young, that is what takes us into a place of influence when they're older. And so it's strengthening that relationship, figuring out our own triggers, our own, how we want to respond, what we want to teach. And then focusing on personal development as well. So behavior change. How do we let go of old habits? How do we create new habits? Trying to understand more about the brain and how we live, where behavior comes from, really.
Those 3 buckets are really great. And it's very all encompassing, because at times we feel like, oh, I just need to fix this area right here. We don't understand that situation has lots of roots in other areas. So we kind of need to look in other, they're all connected. They kind of overlap. So you got to take a holistic look at everything. Something that came up for me, and this is from my own experience, but I'm sure other moms out there and dads would agree. How do you help families when I'm assuming the mom is going through the program and going through all of this, and maybe the spouse is not necessarily on board, or they have diverging opinions? Because that's something that I've struggled with my husband in many ways, obviously, because we have different personalities and we have different cultural backgrounds, different upbringings, different childhood traumas, of course. So we're trying to overcompensate in different ways. So tell me more.
Yeah. So anytime that there is a conflict, and we'll just talk about spouses, it could be in any situation, really. But one of the really important things is to come into it with a common understanding of what is our bottom line. And I call it the BUT principle. My mom always said, BUT stands for bottom underlying truth. So at the end of the day, like we might argue, but our bottom line is we love each other. Right. And just knowing that, and you have to say that to each other.
Yeah.
You have to do that in the little things. You have to be willing to build that relationship, have that positive, like Gottman always talks about 5-to-1, right? 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative. It doesn't mean there's an absence of negative.
Right.
But it does mean that we are building and intentionally creating a positive, loving, nurturing environment. So we have that foundation, we have that bottom underlying truth in place. And then because I'm like my choice, Gottman teaches us again. So this is John Gottman that talks a lot about relationships and especially marriage relationships. He says, you can see how a conversation is going to go by the first few moments of how it is.
Yeah.
And so if I'm working with somebody, I would say, okay, how do you want this conversation to go? My guess is you want to be heard, right? You want to be understood. You want to find a place of commonality where maybe you're compromising, but you both feel good about it. It's a win-win in some way or another. And so we step in and we provide that for the other person first, because that's the most likely way that it's going to happen for us. We meet their needs first. So we might say, hey, I really want to understand, how do you feel about this thing? And we let them talk and we make sure that they feel understood. So what I'm hearing is that you feel such and such. Is that true? Is there anything else that I'm missing? And you really, 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 truly understand them for the sake of you want to understand this person that you love. Yeah. And then you share how you feel. And then when it comes down, you say, okay, there's lots of ways to decide which way to go with it. One is, who cares the most about this thing, right? This is like a really big deal to me and it's a little deal to you. Or not, right? Another is, who has to deal with the day in and day out of it. So a lot of times with the kids, it comes down to, we might differ in this, but if he's the one that's going to be putting this in place with the kids, I'm going to trust that his way is also good. And I'm going to let him go with it because he's the one that's doing that day in and day out. If it's me, if I am making the meals and I want to eat this way and I'm the one who has to do it day in and day out, then maybe we're going to go with mine. Another thing that is really helpful is to know that we always have a shelf. And what I mean by that is we can always put it on the shelf and decide another day. Sometimes it feels very urgent. It feels like if we don't solve this thing right now, I'm going to be angry. But most often when we step back, when we take a deep breath, there's very little that is going to happen in this moment or the next 24 hours or the next week that is going to have a long-term detrimental anything in our home and family. And so sometimes we just need a little space. We need to find that common, okay, we're going to keep learning about it together. We're going to come back to this later and figure out what works for both of us, maybe find a compromise or some other solution that works for us. And we can teach our kids to do this same thing too, right? Yeah. It's understanding the other person's perspective, learning how to speak our own in a way that's reasonable and respectful, and then finding that win-win. And if we don't, being willing to put it on a shelf until we're in a place where we can.
Oh, this is so good. And it's all that modeling too.
Yeah.
We want our kids to act this way, right? Absolutely. In general terms, in their interactions in school and in their lives and growing up. But if we're not doing that, then we're not really setting that great of an example. That's not to say that it's easy. And back to what you said in the beginning, none of the things that we're talking about here are like rocket science, completely new concepts, right? We've heard of this deep inside. We know this, right? But getting around to actually practicing this, not that easy. And it usually goes with the simplest things are the basics, right? Is what we should be sticking with. And at times we have a hard time. So
that's why my tagline is Parenting Life Simplified.
Right. Oh my gosh.
It really is. We complicate a lot. I mean, even when it comes down to like solving a conflict, like you're talking about, what's wrong with that other person's idea?
Yeah.
So often the only thing that's wrong with it is it's not my idea.
Exactly.
Like,
that's it. It's very simple.
I like to remind myself, like, I'm a good chooser. When I chose to marry my husband, I did a really good job and I love the way that he is. And there are different ways to raise kids, or different ways to run our home or different ways to whatever it is. But do I really think that my way is the only right way? Like, there's just so much that we can learn to let go of when we have that bottom underlying truth. When at the end of the day, like, what really, really matters is, are we loving each other? And that's not even like an oversimplification. That is like sincerely what matters at the end of it.
It really is. That's such a great reminder. I love that so much. So what are some ways that you do work with families? Is it primarily moms? Tell us more about your programs and how.
Yeah, we have moms and dads. I would say more moms, but we do have some brave dads with us. We love them. And so I have courses that are either self-paced for home management. We have a personal development mastermind, Thrive Academy, that helps moms really step into their potential and find more fulfillment in their home lives and in their individual lives. And then we do a lot of education, like masterclasses and communication through email and things like that, where we are learning, growing. And then I also host events. So we run parenting summits and bring in experts for our community to learn from. So those are kind of the big ways that we interact with families.
Very good. Lots of different things to choose from.
And I'd say one-on-one coaching too. That's
wonderful. Well, before you tell us how to find you, and I'll have all the links in the show notes for everyone to go and check it out, I would love to do a little rapid fire question. Yeah. And based on our conversation, I'm so excited to hear what you come up with, because that's what's fun for me in this part, is that everyone has their own perspective, especially based on the business that they run and the things that they are constantly talking about and thinking about and teaching on. It usually comes about in those answers. So I'm super excited. Yeah. Are you ready?
I know. I've heard your podcast many times, and I was like, oh, I should think about it. I'm like, no, I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to do what comes.
Yes. Awesome. All right. So the first one is notice yourself.
Awareness.
Which is A in the ABC.
Which is A, which is like take a breath, right? Like step back from being busy and just notice what's going on.
Yes. The next one is listen to yourself.
Trust.
Forgive yourself.
Grace.
Empower yourself.
Possibilities.
And last but not least, transform yourself.
Love. I'm going to say that's what I want to transform into.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I always say transformation for me is being a more self-accepting version of myself. And then in terms of, overall transformation also is loving more the people around you. And I love what you said. That's a great reminder. I should write it down somewhere. I chose my husband for a reason. Remind yourself, right? I believe my decisions are great. So.
Yes.
Especially those hard times. That was great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing this amazing wisdom. Tell us how to find you.
Thank you. It's been fun to chat with you. So my hub is lovinlifewithlittles.com, LOVIN, lifewithlittles.com. And I'm on that same handle on Instagram and Facebook. So trying to keep it easy.
Yay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was so great. And I'm excited for parents to listen to this one and be encouraged and to get in touch with you and learn some more tools and support.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. I know this was a huge one for me coming out of summer, getting the kids back to school, but still, keeping my sanity. And I loved all the things that Marielle touched on. Don't forget to connect with her. All the links are in the show notes. And once again, I will remind you about my TEDx on workshop. It's called TEDx One-on-One Workshop. We're going live August 25th at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. But if you can't make it, but you still would love the scoop on how to get involved to actually fast track your way to the stage, head on over to the link to sign up for the workshop. It's $55 and you have lifetime access to watch at any time. Until next time, bye.